everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be my favorite sci-fi that I read in 2020. So these are all of my 4.5 or 5-star reads in the sci-fi genre. So we shall go ahead and get started. And the first book I'll talk about here is Tiamat's Wrath by James S. A. Corey. So this is the 8th book in the Expanse series, which I've absolutely adored. This series has been very much about like this proto-molecule and just, I think, political turmoil and wars and things between Earth, Mars, and the Belt. So in this particular book, I'm gonna try to be kind of vague to not spoil stuff. We essentially have had these gates in later books, and so we learn more about the forces, I think, surrounding the gates, and then we kind of have a rebellion going on as well. So we'll just leave it at that, but this is such a great series. Oh my goodness, I cannot emphasize that enough. It's been so nice. I think there was a time skip between books 6 and 7, but it's been really cool to see the characters over time. In particular, we get to see how they change as they age and kind of mellow out and mature, I would say. So it's just been so great to, watch this character development. Each of the Expanse books has different point of view characters, and I really liked the ones that we get here. We get to see some returning characters from previous books that I really love, so I was super happy to see them again here. It's a very fast-paced book. There's a lot going on here. There are some really emotionally devastating things that happen here, and I'm still very sad about some of these things. I absolutely flew through it. I read it in a few hours because I just could not stop reading. We have some interesting scientific revelations that happen, and it's just really cool to learn, I think, more about the proto-molecule itself as well as these gates and just some of the scientific experiments going on. It's just such an epic space opera that I absolutely highly recommend. We've actually been watching the show version as well, and that is an amazing adaptation of these books, so I also highly recommend that. But yeah, this was fantastic. The next book I'll talk about is Rogue Protocol by Martha Wells. So this is the 3rd book of the Murderbot Diaries. So this is obviously a series about Murderbot, which is this self-aware AI bot who has kind of hacked its governor module, so now it, doesn't have to obey orders, essentially. In this particular installment, we follow Murderbot just traveling around. It's trying to gather information about this corporation that's doing some shady things. I just continue to really love this series. Murderbot is fantastic to follow. I really enjoy books about AI, and I think Murderbot in particular is highly entertaining. I think Murderbot doesn't always know how to interact with humanity, and it just kind of wants to be left alone and, watch its shows and catch up on its media, which is pretty relatable. There's lots of action, some very exciting moments here. In this particular one, there's something that kind of reminds me of a face hugger from Aliens, so that was really interesting and certainly exciting. We learn more about these nefarious happenings of this corporation, and I think that's particularly intriguing. And I also just genuinely enjoy watching Murderbot interact with other AI characters and other robots. It's interesting to just see the different personality types that kind of come up and how Murderbot reacts to them. And then the next one I'll talk about is Exit Strategy, also by Martha Wells. This is the 4th installment of the Murderbot Diaries. Murderbot is trying to collect information on this corporation and is trying to fight against it. I think it's been really interesting to see how Murderbot has kind of evolved over the books and how these interactions with humans have changed. I think Murderbot is starting to build stronger relationships and seem almost more human, and so then I think that kind of brings up what does it really mean to be human. And I think that's always a very interesting idea to explore. Lots of action here. It's really great. These are definitely quicker reads, these first 4 entries of this, so you can get through it pretty quickly, and it's just so much fun. And the next book I'll talk about is Network Effect by Martha Wells. So this is the 5th installment of the Murderbot Diaries and the first full-length novel, which was super fun. So essentially here, Murderbot's human crew have been captured, and we have an old friend returning that needs some urgent assistance. Murderbot has to essentially choose whether it will help its friends or just keep pretending like it doesn't care. I just really enjoyed the direction that this story went. There's some really crazy developments that I absolutely didn't predict, and I ended up loving them so much. I was really glad to see Art, a character that we were introduced to in previous novels, come back here, and I just really enjoy the friendship between Murderbot and Art. It's just so much fun. I think Murderbot really downplays its relationships with not only other bots and but also humans, but it Murderbot consistently does try to help everyone out, so I just love Murderbot so much. The next book I'll talk about is The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. So this is the first book of the Lady Astronaut series, and this is essentially like an alternate history type book. In 1952, we have this meteorite that falls and ends up destroying Washington, D.C. and the rest of like the East Coast. So it's this extinction level event. Everybody is essentially now trying to colonize space because Earth will become uninhabitable. So we follow Elma, who is a pilot and one of these mathematical computers, and she starts to wonder why women can't be astronauts as well. I think it does take a lot of inspiration from, like actual historical events, like, what we see in Hidden Figures, for instance. But I just love this so much. Like, I love seeing women who are good at math, like, obviously, as a woman in biostatistics. It is obviously this alternate history, but we do have the same sort of issues, I think, with, like, racism and sexism. So that's just, like, a very interesting exploration here. I really enjoyed Elma as a main character. I think she is, really driven, obviously. She wants women to be able to be astronauts as well, which I think is, like, very admirable. So Elma struggles with anxiety over, like, public presentations, which I think is, like, very relatable. And she also kind of struggles with what's considered to be proper. And I just really like seeing the portrayal of anxiety here. I like seeing how she recites the dishes of pi and prime numbers to kind of control her anxiety, and like I feel like I also count things, so like I think that was particularly relatable for me. There's also just like medication for anxiety that was pretty well handled here. Several characters mentioned that they take medication, and that and there's just generally a lot of discussion about how that's totally fine. So I just really appreciated seeing that discussion here. In general, we have some really great female characters, and I just love seeing their interactions, and I'm just like really invested in Elma's journey as well as the other characters that we get here. The next book I'll talk about is Catfishing on CatNet by Naomi Kritzer. So this is a YA sci-fi thriller. Our main character, Steph, and her mother are always on the run, and the only constant in Steph's life is this online community called CatNet. And this is like a social media site where cat pics are currency. Turns out the administrator of this site is actually an AI. So there's this threat to Steph, and her friends in real life and online band together to help her out. There's a lot of diversity here, which is really great. There's, a variety of genders, including non-binary characters. We've got different sexualities, different backgrounds, and it's all just very natural. It's incredibly fast-paced, and I just really could not put it down. I just flew through this. I needed to know what was happening. And it's also just really funny. I think the friendships in particular are really fantastic, both these real-life friendships and these online friendships. Obviously, like I've mentioned with Murderbot, like I really enjoy AI characters, and seeing this AI that's in charge of this catnet is like... It was just so wonderful. I really loved the AI here. And I think there's some discussion here about like the humanity of AI, what rights AI should have, and like how much interfering can it do. I also think there's like some really great discussions of social media here. The mystery that's kind of underlying this threat to Steph is super intriguing, and it's like definitely terrifying at times. Just like, oh my god, it was so good. It was so good. I just absolutely adored this. So then the next book I'll talk about is Chaos on CatNet, also by Naomi Kritzer. So I actually read this as an ARC. This doesn't come out until April this year, but oh my god, I couldn't stop. I was just like, I have to read this right now. I just need to know what's going to happen. I loved the first one so much. So in this particular installment, we have this mysterious entity that's hacking into social networks and chat rooms that's kind of instigating paranoia and violence in the real world. Steph, a new friend, Nell, and this AI character must stop this from happening. Like the first book, it's really fast-paced and engaging. We have some really cool plot threads here, including some that deal with cults, which I always find like super fascinating. I read this in, I think, December or November, something like that, but I thought it was really great to read as, winter is coming in, because there are certain aspects of this book that kind of deal with the cold and how that plays a factor in some of the things that happen. So like I thought it was so atmospheric to read at that time that I did. We have some really tense and like chilling, again, both literally and otherwise, like moments that happen in this. And I also just really liked the author's note here about how some of the events of 2020 affected some plot points. Like this book is envisioning a future Minneapolis where change has happened, in particular with the police force. So I thought it was just like a really great way to explore how these things could be done and like what could the future look like, right? That's very much, I think, in the realm of sci-fi, just exploring different possibilities that could happen. The characters are really wonderful. Like I love Steph and Cheshire Cat, and I also really liked this new point of view character, Nell. I really like seeing how Cheshire Cat wants to help their friends, and you know, Steph is just like a really great, like, sweet character, and I like seeing how she wants to help Nell out, even though they just met. And then, like, Nell herself is also extremely fascinating. She comes from this cult background, so it's, like, super interesting to read from this different perspective. Again, we have lots of really great representation here with LGBTQ plus characters, including some polyamory and an ace character here. You know, I think what's really nice about this particular book is, like, there's some darker themes here for sure, but there's kind of this underlying message of hope, which is just so lovely to see. And I just, oh my god, I really, like, highly recommend this series. Like, obviously this one is not out yet, but when it comes out, like, you should definitely read it. It's so good, and I can't wait to see what happens next. The next book I'll talk about is The Light Brigade by Kameron Hurley. This is a more military sci-fi. So we essentially have these soldiers that are, like, broken down into light in order to travel to, like, interplanetary battlefronts. However, some don't come back quite right. So we follow a character who experiences these drops that don't quite sync up with the rest of the platoon, and this character learns that the war is maybe not exactly what the corporations say it is. Whoa boy, this was so fast-paced, and like, I just flew through it. I really needed to know what was going on. Obviously we have some like time shenanigans happening here, so I think it would actually be really interesting to reread this and see, you know, if I can like pick up on more clues. So I think that like kind of speaks to the strength of this. Like, if I'm immediately wanting to reread it after finishing it, like, that's pretty impressive. In terms of military sci-fi, this is very accessible. I've definitely felt bad for the main character. Like, this is really a confusing situation to find yourself in, and I was very sympathetic towards, you know, the overall, like, oh my god, what's happening. The war here is definitely brutal. I just really liked learning more about, like, what all was going on throughout the course of the book. I also just thought this idea of, like, traveling through light was so fascinating, so I think that was really well done. Just the, like, amount of ways this could go wrong is terrifying. The next book I'll talk about is Chaos Reigning by Jessie Mihalik. So this is the third book of the Consortium Rebellion series, which I absolutely adored. It's more of a sci-fi romance. In this particular novel, we follow the youngest sibling of this family that we've been following throughout, and she kind of just acts vapid as a cover in order to be underestimated, and she's secretly a spy, so she goes undercover at this summer retreat to essentially, like, gather intel about some treachery that's happening. One of her sisters sends along this guard to pose as her lover, and they have to essentially, like, work together to uncover plots. So this was just so wonderful. Like, I am so sad to see the series over. Oh my god, I loved it so much. I think Jessie Mihalik is really great at writing strong female characters, which I just love seeing. I really liked seeing her question, like, obviously she kind of puts on this persona, but I liked seeing her question her identity and whether or not she's actually, you know, the person that she pretends to be, and like, is she actually as competent as she thinks she is? I think that was just some very nice character exploration here. The, like, romantic interest, there's definitely some chemistry there. The series in general has a lot of really great political schemes, there's really great action, we have some betrayals, so it's definitely, like, just so fascinating, keeps you on your toes, you want to keep reading it. I think there's certain plot points in here that, like, kind of bring things full circle with some stuff that was introduced in book one, so that was just super cool to see. I think there's some, you know, really fun technology. The next book I'll talk about is Demon in White by Ruocchio, and this is the third book in the Sun Eater series. So in general, this series has kind of been this character recounting his life, and, like, we know some things end up happening, but the series has been kind of like the how do we get to that point sort of story, I guess. I really like this structure in general, and it's cool to see how, you know, he grows older and maybe wiser. We have this new king among the Sealson, which is this alien race. It's kind of leading some strategic attacks on the Empire. We also have this, like, cult forming around our main character because of these legends that are, you know, popping up. But, like, the people in the government don't really trust him, and so, you know, he's kind of surrounded by enemies on all sides, and is seeking some answers to things that have happened to him. Each book has had something, there's, like, really cool elements, there's some things that, like, are just so shocking, and I was like, ugh, goodness. Here, I think we have some really terrifying new enemies, and we do get to learn more about the history of this world, which was fascinating. Each of our new foes have some really distinct features and feel really well developed. There's a couple scenes in particular that feel like sci-fi horror, which I really love. You know, there's some really great battles here, and there's like some downtime where our characters can do research, which is fascinating. There's a sort of like politics and schemes going on here, so that's great to see. You know, like it's a very large chunky book, but I was like invested the entire time. It's fun to see like the legends about our main character grow over the course of this book, and I really can't wait to see what happens next. I think he's a great main character, and I just like the new developments that we get here quite a bit. We also have some like really great side characters in this series, and it's fun to just see, I think, the interactions between everybody, and like even though our main character sometimes does make mistakes in his interactions, I think it really humanizes him, and like we get to see him as a person rather than just this legend that has grown around him. The series is just like so rich, and it's like each time after I finish the book, I'm just like, I feel like I have a massive book hangover because I was like, there's so much going on here, like how can any book I read next possibly live up to what I just read? The next book I'll talk about is Before Mars by Emma Newman. So this is the third book in this series, and they're technically all standalones, but I do think it is better to read them in order. So this is actually the one that I had seen first, and I was like, oh, that sounds awesome, but I like wanted to read the books before that. But yeah, I mean, like my gut instinct of like thinking that I would like this was spot on. I loved it. We have Anna, who goes to Mars on a mission as a geologist / artist, and she's like trying to fit in with the rest of her team. However, she ends up discovering this mysterious note that's in her own handwriting to like not trust this psychologist, and she doesn't remember writing it. She starts to find things that don't quite add up, like a fake wedding ring. There's footprints in a place where this AI has been insisting that like no one has visited, so there's this mystery of what is really going on. This is so much fun. Like I thought this underlying mystery was super compelling, and I really wanted to know what was going on. Like it's super fast paced and really easy to read. I think we have some really interesting technology here, as well as an intriguing AI. And with this mystery, it's kind of like, is there something actually going on, or is our main character just losing it? So I think that is super fun to read about. The characters in this series in general have been really interesting. Anna is definitely my favorite character of the series so far. She's very compelling and super realistic. I liked seeing how, I mean, this sounds weird, but she struggles with postpartum depression, which is not something I usually see represented that much, and I really appreciated just being able to see it here. She definitely has this troubled past, and I felt very sympathetic towards her. I liked how she's both like this geologist and an artist. I feel like that's very relatable because while I am, you know, like I am obviously in biostatistics myself, but I also enjoy doing things outside of that are more artsy. I mean, like, I guess technically this channel can count as that, right? So I think it's nice to just see characters here who have a variety of tastes. Mental health representations in these books are fantastic, and we also have a non-binary character in this particular installment. This was just a blast to read, and like I said, I mean, technically they're standalones, but I do think it is nice to have that background knowledge of the previous two books before jumping into this. The next book I'll talk about is Binti, the Complete Trilogy by Nnedi Okorafor. So we follow Binti, our main character, who gets the chance to go to this like really prestigious university, and because she is extremely skilled at math. And on the way, this like jellyfish-like alien race end up attacking, and she's the only survivor. She ends up having to kind of broker the peace between this alien race and this planet where this university is in order to save everybody. She has to deal with assorted biases, and she just generally has to survive and thrive. So I thought this was so great. Like, this is a collection of the 3 Binti novellas as well as the new short story, which was really great. I do think the first story is probably my favorite, but I really enjoy all of them. I just like basically just want to spend all the time in this world, so it's really nice to read the collection as a whole. The new story included here is also really nice because we get to see Binti deal with some of the aftermath of events from the first story, and I always enjoy exploring like what happens next after like these big events, so I think that was really well done here, and I think it really develops her more as a character. And we're introduced to some like fun side characters. There's some like really shocking moments that happen in particular in the third story, but I really liked how everything concluded. I think this world is so strong, and I would absolutely read more about it. Like, I just really liked this university setting where we have a variety of really diverse beings. I think, again, Binti is a wonderful main character, and I just love how she's so good at math. Like, again, with me and, like, these female characters who love math, like, I just find them so relatable being a woman in a STEM field myself. She's definitely, like, forced into this really terrible situation, but she does try to survive and pave a way for the future. I think a lot of people underestimate her or just kind of dismiss her, but she persists, which I think is like super admirable. You know, I think she has PTSD from some of the things that have happened, and I thought that this was portrayed pretty realistically, and it's just, you know, really great to explore this topic. The next book I'll talk about is Star Wars Lost Stars by Claudia Gray. We follow two characters who grow up on the Outer Rim, and they want to enroll in the Imperial Academy to become pilots. One of our characters ends up joining the rebellion after seeing what the Empire does, but the other stays. So we have this love story kind of unfolding on opposite sides of the war. This is set up, I think, around the time of the original trilogy up through the events of The Force Awakens. So it's just, I mean, I really love this. I think Claudia Gray's Star Wars books have been some of my top Star Wars books. Like, I very much enjoy her writing. I think this particular one, it was really great to see just these, you know, big events that we've seen before in the movies, just through the eyes of regular people. And I think it's cool to just see, you know, not only how, like, the heroes and these big events are seen to just regular people, but also, like, what is it really like to be in the Empire, and how can people, like, find themselves, I guess, involved in this war. Our main characters definitely wrestle with the ethics of what the Empire does and try to convince each other to be on the same side, so it made for some, like, really interesting struggles and just, like, ooh, heartbreaking moments. I really enjoyed both of the main characters here. It's fun to watch them grow up. We see them when they're kids and follow them, you know, through the academy and up until they're older fighting in this war. I really liked how they're both very skilled pilots. They come from different backgrounds. Sienna is kind of from this lower class on this planet, and she's raised to be loyal and keep her word. Thane, on the other hand, is from the upper class, but he's still pretty moral. I really believed in the romance here. It's definitely more of a slow burn romance. This definitely feels very true to the movies and just like the general Star Wars universe. So the last book I'll talk about is Revenant Gun by Yoon Ha Lee, and this is the third book of the Machineries of Empire series. And I did actually read all of the series in 2020, and I really loved them all, though Revenant Gun is my favorite. Generally, I think there's this plot to overthrow the calendar, which is kind of what governs people's behavior. So throughout the series, we've had Jajao, who is this undead mad general, and he's kind of like the most feared man in the galaxy and kind of plays an important role in a lot of the events that happen here. So we'll just kind of leave it at that. I mean, there's definitely high stakes of like this Hexarchate and, you know, whether it should be preserved or overthrown. This is just such a great series. I think that this is one of the most unique sci-fi series I've ever read. Like, there are some insane ideas of things that happen. Like, here in this, you know, in Revenant Gun, there's things like corpse calligraphy, which is like, whoa! Like, I would never have thought that that would be a concept. Like, I would never have dreamed that to be a thing that exists. And so I'm just, like, so impressed by Yoon Ha Lee's imagination and just, like, ability to come up with these really cool, unique concepts. You know, I think this calendar itself is really interesting, and it's cool to see just, like, over the course of the books how it really affects people's behavior. It's definitely like a complex concept, and I think over the course of the books, I, like, at first I was kind of like, I'm not really sure what's going on, but I was, you know, totally here for it. Like, it's fun to just kind of be on the ride. And I think by the end of this series, like, I have a much better grasp on what was happening, so it's just like, it's fun to, I think, kind of uncover what's going on over the course of the series. You know, there's, I think, a lot of really surprising moments that happen here. I think just, like, the humor in these books is really just so much fun. This series is really diverse. We have a lot of LGBTQ plus characters, have some, like, robotic assistants that pop up, and they're just super fun. What I really enjoy about the series is, like, I think a lot of the concepts are based in mathematics, which, of course, like, again, being in biostatistics, like, I really enjoy seeing math represented, particularly in sci-fi, and I think, you know, I guess this was in the short story collection that I read recently, but there are things like counterfactuals mentioned, which is something that I deal with personally in my research, and so it's just fun to see, like, these mathematical concepts, like, kind of brought to life and sort of made, like, physical, which is really intriguing. We have some really interesting character dynamics throughout this. So with that, those are all of my favorite sci-fi books that I read in 2020. Obviously, a lot of I think most of these are in series. There's a couple of more standalones or first in the series, but really recommend these. Obviously, like, oh my goodness, so many great books here. I had such a great time with all of them, and obviously highly recommend you check them out. So let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. And for your question of the day, what was your favorite sci-fi read of 2020? If it's hard for you to choose, which I totally understand, like obviously that's why I'm talking about all of these here. If you've made it this far, leave some sort of sci-fi emoji. I do have a Discord channel, and if you want to join that, the link is in the description below. I hope you're all having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.